They tried to destroy my life with fake fines and threats. So I bought the building their office was in. And what I did next? It made the HOA beg me for mercy. But I didn't stop there. You won't believe how I took back everything they tried to steal. Watch this. When I bought my townhouse, I believed I was finally stepping into the calm, dignified life I'd worked so hard for. Something steady, something earned. I was 59, semi-retired after 3 decades in commercial real estate, the kind of job that wears on your body and eats away at your peace. And I just wanted a little serenity, a quiet place to enjoy my coffee on the porch, watch the sun cut through the trees in the morning, maybe have my grandson over on Sundays to grill burgers and talk about baseball. The neighborhood looked perfect. Clean sidewalks, tall oaks, American flags waving on front porches, folks walking their dogs and nodding politely as they passed. It was the kind of place that reminded you of how things used to be. And I thought, I'd finally found a home where people respected one another, where everyone minded their business and kept things neighborly. I didn't know then that lurking beneath that postcard charm was something rotten, something that would turn my dream into a slow-burning nightmare. That something was the HOA. Now I'd dealt with HOAs before, and I'm not the kind of guy to bristle at rules. I understand the need for structure. I don't mind mowing my lawn, keeping the place neat and paying my dues. But this HOA? One didn't just enforce order. They ruled like a petty monarchy. I got my first violation 2 weeks after moving in. A letter in the mailbox, crisp and smug, informing me that my Ford F-150 pickup truck was visually disruptive and exceeded the approved length for driveway parking. It was a factory-standard pickup, not a monster truck, not jacked up with lights or flags, just a plain workhorse. I figured it was a misunderstanding, so I showed up to the next HOA meeting thinking we'd have a civil conversation. That's where I met Karen. Yes, actually her name, the HOA president. She sat at the center of a long folding table, flanked by 2 other board members who didn't look at me so much as through me. I explained the truck situation calmly, offered to park it in my garage if needed, but Karen cut me off mid-sentence with a smug smile and a cold, "The rules are not up for debate." That was the beginning of the war. Suddenly, the notices came like clockwork. Your porch light was on past 10 p.m. Violation. Your American flag bracket is an inch too low. Violation. Your grandson left a toy on the front lawn overnight. Violation. Each fine felt less like a penalty and more like a message. We don't want you here. I tried reasoning with them, I really did. I wrote letters, I attended meetings, I asked my neighbors if they'd had issues, but most were too scared or too tired to fight. That's just how it is, they said, don't poke the bear. But I'm not the kind of man who gets pushed around, especially not in my own home. The final straw came on a Thursday morning. I came home from the store and found a notice, taped to my door in bold red letters, intent to place Leon on property due to outstanding violations. My hands shook. I called the board immediately demanding a breakdown of the charges. They said I owed over $3,000 for violations that had never been properly explained or documented. I knew it was illegal, and I knew what they were trying to do. They wanted to drown me in bureaucracy, stress me out, force me to sell and walk away with my tail between my legs. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at that letter, feeling the kind of rage that doesn't just burn, it hardens. And that's when something clicked. They thought they were dealing with just another scared homeowner. But what they didn't know was that I used to build commercial deals for a living. I knew how property worked, I knew how leases worked, and I knew that the little office building where the HOA held their meetings, the same place they used to sign off on my fines, it had been on the market for 6 months. I made a call, then another. Within 2 weeks, the building was mine. No announcement, no warning. I walked the property line with my attorney, reviewed their lease, and smiled. It was month to month. No protections, no leverage, just ink on paper, and I now held the pen. I tripled their rent overnight, sent a formal notice by courier. They had 30 days to comply or vacate. I also reclaimed the parking lot behind the building, the one they used during every monthly meeting. Within a week, I had it fenced off and hired a landscaping crew to convert it into a private garden. I even put in a fountain and a wooden bench with a plaque that read, "Reserved for residents who mind their own business." And yes, I made sure Karen saw it. I caught her one morning staring through the chain-link fence, her mouth twisted, in disbelief. She tried to fight it, called an emergency meeting, sent me angry letters through her lawyer. But I was clean. Every move I made was legal, and the rest of the neighborhood, they started paying attention. More people showed up to meetings, more people started asking questions. And then something I didn't expect happened. Neighbors began thanking me. Quiet nods at the mailbox, a plate of cookies on my doorstep. One man even slipped me a note that said, "Thank you for standing up. We needed this." If you're still watching this and rooting for justice, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon to all so you don't miss what's coming next. Because just when I thought I'd seen the last of their schemes, I discovered something buried in the HOA's finances. Something big. Something that might not just bring down Karen's little empire, but possibly expose years of misused funds and shady contracts. And let's just say, I'm not the only one who's noticed. What I found could flip this whole neighborhood upside down. But that's a story for the next episode. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. It started with a letter. One of those crisp, smug pieces of paper that lets you know someone's been watching you. Slipped neatly into my mailbox like a passive-aggressive handshake, it read, "Your vehicle exceeds the maximum allowable length for driveway parking. Please relocate immediately to avoid citation." That vehicle was my Ford F-150, a stock pickup, nothing wild or lifted or custom. Just a good old American truck that I'd driven for years without issue. I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe they meant someone else, maybe a neighbor complained about the wrong house. So I decided to go to the next HOA meeting and clear things up like reasonable adults. I'd never been to one before. Figured it would be some coffee table discussion, a little back and forth, maybe a few updates about street paving or lawn maintenance. But the moment I walked into that community hall, I felt it in the air. Stiff necks, cold eyes, and clipped greetings. That's where I met Karen. Yes, that was her actual name, and she wore it like a crown. Sitting dead center behind a plastic nameplate that read Board President, she gave me that tight-lipped smile people use when they're already convinced you're guilty. I calmly explained that my truck wasn't anything unusual, certainly not oversized, and had always fit just fine in the driveway. She didn't even look up from her notes, just slid her glasses down her nose, looked at me like I was a misbehaving student, and said, "Rules are rules, Mr. Harper." No discussion, no context, just a ruling, like she was Judge Judy with a clipboard. I offered to park on the street to comply, but the very next morning, another letter arrived. This one said, "Overnight street parking is not permitted under HOA guidelines. Second violation will result in fine." I stared at it in disbelief. So, let me get this straight. I can't park in my driveway, and I can't park on the street. What was I supposed to do, levitate the thing? That's when the avalanche started. Week after week, the notices came rolling in. Wind chime exceeds decibel limit. That's right, they measured the sound of my wind chime. Porch light, left on past 10 p.m. Apparently, my 60-watt bulb was a threat to the sanctity of the neighborhood. Unauthorized flower bed color scheme. I'd planted marigolds, yellow and orange, nothing outrageous, but apparently the HOA had a pre-approved palette, and my flowers didn't make the cut. The message was loud and clear. "We don't want you here." At first, I tried to laugh it off. Told myself maybe they were just sticklers, overly concerned with appearances, but it started to feel more personal. I'd see board members walking past my house, not smiling, just staring, taking mental notes like I was under surveillance. Then, after a particularly tense meeting, I stayed behind to grab a forgotten folder. That's when I overheard it. Karen whispering to another board member, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "If he doesn't like it, he can move." It hit me like a gut punch. This wasn't about rules. This was about removal. They had decided behind closed doors that I didn't fit their picture. Maybe it was because I didn't join their block parties. Maybe it was the flag on my porch, or the fact that I didn't care to play politics. Whatever it was, they had declared quiet war, and they were playing dirty. I started documenting everything, every notice, every fine, every interaction. I kept a log, took photos, and even recorded a few conversations just in case. My grandson came over one weekend and asked why I looked so tired. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that your own neighborhood is trying to squeeze you out? That people who smile and wave in public are stabbing you in the back with paperwork? One day I found a fresh violation taped to my door. It wasn't in an envelope, it wasn't folded. It was slapped there with blue painter's tape, big and bold like a warning label. Final notice, trash cans visible from street on non-pickup. Day. I'd brought them in less than an hour after pickup. It was nonsense. All of it. Designed to push me, wear me down, make me give up my home and walk away defeated. But they didn't know me. I'm not wired to run. I'm wired to push, back, especially when someone messes with my dignity. I started digging, not just into their rules but into their structure, their bylaws, their finances. I learned how their voting worked, how their leadership rotated, and that's when I realized something incredible. A majority of board members' terms were about to expire in 6 months. The neighborhood had the power to vote them out, but no one ever ran against them because people were too intimidated or too disconnected. That's when I decided, if they were going to come after me, I'd bring the whole story into the light. I created a private Facebook group for the neighborhood. Just a place to share concerns, I said. At first, just a handful joined, but then I shared some of my experiences, posted redacted violation letters, started asking questions like, "Have you received unexplained fines lately?" And, "Did you know the board spent $8,000 last year on beautification consultants?" That group blew up. Turns out I wasn't the only one being targeted. Stories came pouring in. One woman fined for leaving a patriotic wreath on her door in July. A veteran told to remove a decal from his window. A widow fined for having her grandson visit for too many nights in a row. They had been getting away with it because no one fought back, but now we were connecting, we were organizing. And if this story's stirring something in you, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and make sure the bell icon is set to all so you don't miss the next part of this story. Because just when I thought I'd seen the extent of their harassment, something truly stunning happened. I received a packet in the mail, anonymous return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note that simply said, "You should see this." I plugged it in, and my heart almost stopped. It was a recording, taken from inside a private HOA meeting. Not public, not on the record. In it, Karen's voice was crystal clear, laughing, saying things like, "We're going to make him wish he never moved here," and even worse, "Don't worry, we've got someone on the inside at the county zoning office." That's right. They weren't just bullying, they were conspiring, crossing legal lines, maybe even criminal ones. I sat there staring at the screen, realizing this wasn't just a petty feud. It was a coordinated abuse of power, and I had the proof. Now I just had to decide what to do with it. But that decision, that's where things really get interesting. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. They hit me with fines, hundreds of dollars every single week like clockwork, turning my mailbox into a torture device that reminded me just how much these people wanted me gone. Every letter was a slap in the face, a reminder that the neighborhood I once loved was now a battleground where I was the enemy. I tried to fight back, filing appeals for every bogus citation, whether it was for my porch light, my flowers, or some imaginary rule I'd never heard of. But every time I sent in my appeal, it was dismissed by the very same people who handed me the fines, rubber stamping their own decisions without even a hint of fairness. It felt like they'd rigged the system, and I was stuck in a loop where justice was just a word they tossed around to scare me off. Then came the worst blow. One afternoon I pulled into my driveway tired and drained, only to find a bright yellow notice taped to my front door. My heart sank as I read the words. Notice of lien proceedings due to unpaid fines. I stared at that paper, stunned. I had paid every fine that made sense, every violation that wasn't just a sneaky power play. Yet here they were, stacking up imaginary debts against me, hoping to squeeze me out by targeting my property itself. The thought of a lien on my home, the place I built my life, the place where my grandson's laughter echoed in the backyard, made my blood boil. But beneath that fury, something else stirred. A spark of defiance. Because I wasn't just a guy trying to keep his house. I was a man with 30 years of commercial real estate experience, and I knew the game they were playing wasn't just petty harassment. It was a calculated attack on my ownership, my dignity, and my future. So I sat down, took a deep breath, and started digging. That's when I stumbled on a detail they'd missed, or maybe thought I wouldn't notice. The building, where the HOA office was run, the nerve center of their operation, was quietly listed for sale. The same cramped little office that had been the source of all my headaches, the place where Karen and the board members held their secret meetings and plotted against me, was about to have a new owner. Suddenly, the battlefield shifted. Instead of being cornered, I saw an opportunity. If I could buy that building, I'd be the landlord of the very people who'd been tormenting me, controlling their rent, and flipping the script in a way they never expected. But it wasn't going to be easy. I knew the HOA wouldn't sell to just anyone. They'd try to block me, stall me, or find any excuse to shut down the deal. I had to move fast and smart, call in favors from old contacts, and play hardball. Myself. I began researching the property, speaking with the real estate agent, and quietly lining up financing. At the same time, the fines kept piling up. The harassment didn't stop. If anything, it escalated. I received a notice about my mailbox being non-compliant with community standards and another about unauthorized decorations on my porch. Just ridiculous stuff, but I ignored it. My focus was on a bigger prize, turning their own game against them. And that's when the neighborhood started paying attention. People who had been silent, quietly suffering under the HOA's heavy hand, began reaching out. To me, neighbors who'd felt powerless were asking how I planned to beat these bullies. If this story is hitting home for you, and you want to see justice served, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell to all notifications so you don't miss a single moment of how this showdown unfolds. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every homeowner trapped under the thumb of this tyrannical HOA. The tension was building, and I could feel the stakes climbing higher with every passing day. Then came the twist. I never saw coming. Just as I was preparing my bid for the building, I received a call from the county zoning office. They told me there was a pending review on the property, something the HOA had quietly pushed for behind the scenes. The review could block any sale, meaning my chance to own the office and flip the power dynamic could vanish in an instant. I was standing at a crossroads, either back down or push forward against a system rigged to keep me out. What happened next changed everything. I'm about to reveal how I turned the tables in a way no one expected, how I raised their rent and took their precious parking lot, and why this battle isn't just about me, but about standing up for dignity and truth when you're facing an impossible fight. Stay with me because this story is far from over and what comes next might just blow your mind. I made a few calls, quietly, discreetly, the kind that don't draw attention but set powerful wheels in motion. It turned out the owner of the little building where the HOA ran their so-called official headquarters was actually a friend of a friend. After a brief, low-key negotiation that felt like pulling teeth in slow motion, I had the paperwork in my hands. I was officially the owner of the very property the HOA had been leasing to run their operations, and suddenly, the power balance shifted in a way no one expected. But I didn't stop there. I pulled out their lease agreement, and it was as I hoped, month to month, no long-term contract binding them. That meant I could call the shots. Without hesitation, I tripled their rent effective immediately and sent a clear message: pay up within 30 days or get out. Knowing how tight HOA budgets are, I was certain they couldn't afford this new rate, and it felt like sweet justice for the relentless harassment I'd endured. But that was just the beginning. Behind that building was a parking lot, the HOA, used daily for meetings and staff vehicles, their little kingdom's parking throne. So I fenced it off, hired landscapers, and within a week that parking lot was transformed into a lush private garden, quiet, green, and peaceful, with a residents-only sign hung prominently at the gate. When the next HOA meeting rolled around, Karen strutted up like she owned the place, only to find the door locked tight, with a bold red notice of lease termination taped across it. The shock on her face was priceless. I wish I could have described it better, but my security camera caught every second of it. And now it's my favorite background on my computer screen. A reminder of how the tables had turned. This wasn't just about rent or parking anymore. It was a lesson in standing tall, reclaiming dignity, and proving that no bully can hold sway when you know your rights and refuse to back down. The neighbors who once whispered about the HOA's tyranny now looked at me with a newfound respect. But what I didn't expect was how far this fight would go, and the unexpected consequences that would follow. Before I get into that, please make sure to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell on this channel so you don't miss what happens next. It's a story about justice, truth, and the power of standing your ground that you won't want to miss. Just when I thought I had it all figured out, a new challenge arrived, one that threatened everything I had fought for, forcing me to confront not just the HOA, but a much deeper betrayal. Stick around for the next part because the real battle is just beginning. The HOA didn't take my move lying down. They scrambled to fight back legally, tossing every argument they could muster. But here's the truth. I hadn't broken a single rule. I was simply the new landlord of their old stomping grounds, and that changed everything. Their eviction from the office building was a blow they couldn't undo. Forced out, they crammed themselves into a tiny back room in the community center, far from the power and prestige they once wielded. Without access to the parking lot, now my peaceful green garden, attendance at their meetings plummeted. Folks didn't bother showing up, tired of the fight and the shrinking influence of a board with nowhere to park and no place to call home. With their rent budget blown sky high, the HOA had no choice but to slash enforcement activities and tighten their belts. And the sweetest victory? Every single violation they had filed against me, those endless letters, the fines, the harassment, they quietly dropped them all, like they never happened. No more notices in my mailbox, no more threats, just peace. But this story isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming dignity and justice. A few months after my victory, I decided to run for a seat on the HOA board myself. It wasn't an easy battle. Karen and her allies threw every dirty trick they had. But the community saw the difference between someone who respected the rules and someone who weaponized them. I won the seat. Now the board listens to its neighbors, instead of bullying them. We revised the rules to be fair and reasonable, making sure no one else would suffer the way I did. It felt like a fresh start, not just for me, but for the entire neighborhood. A new chapter grounded in respect and common sense. Here's what I want you to take away from this story. Sometimes, when the system seems designed to push you out, your best move isn't to back down, but to dig in deeper, to stand your ground with strength and knowledge. And if you truly understand the game, you don't just play by their rules. You buy the board they're playing on, flipping the script and claiming your rightful place with dignity. If you're enjoying this story and want to follow the full journey of justice and triumph, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification to all, so you never miss an episode where truth and courage win out. But before I wrap this up, here's the kicker, the twist that no one saw coming. Just when we thought the battle was over, a mysterious new player entered the scene, threatening to turn everything upside down. Who they are and what they want will change everything we thought we knew about this neighborhood fight. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Stay tuned because the story is far from finished and the fight for justice is just getting started. Thanks so much for watching. If this story inspired you or gave you a new perspective on standing your ground and fighting for what's right, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss an episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts or any similar experiences you've had. Drop a comment below and let's start a conversation. Your likes and shares really help support the channel and bring these stories to more people who need a little motivation. Thanks again for being here. Can't wait to see you in the next video.